Thanks everyone for coming back so promptly. Really appreciate it. Hope you had a chance to enjoy some morning refreshments. Who doesn't love a scone, jam and cream as well? We're going to meet our next speaker now, James Maskey. James Maskey, I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. Can you wave your hand? There you are. Excellent. Make your way down. He's an endurance athlete and mental health advocate. He's looking forward to completing his next marathon in just under 2 hours, I believe, seeing as it's... We'll find out how that's going. He is the National Engagement Manager of the Beyond Blue Police and Emergency Services program, working to reduce the stigma associated with mental health conditions, attempted suicide and suicide among police and emergency services personnel. He's a retired frontline Queensland police officer with a service history including general duties, the Police Citizens Youth Club and the Child Protection and Investigation Unit. So I should encourage you as an elite athlete to sprint up here, but do take care, and please make James Maskey very welcome.
Alrighty, well, good morning everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to share my personal story with you all this morning. My name is James Maskey, and usually I'm employed as the Beyond Blue Engagement Manager for the Police and Emergency Services program. The program is responsible for this body of work, answering the call, but today I'm actually not here to discuss my professional capacity. It's actually my personal story with post-traumatic stress disorder. So, in addition to working at Beyond Blue, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, I'm an endurance athlete, and also a former Queensland police officer. Before we take a deep dive into my journey with post-traumatic stress disorder, I just wanted to begin by providing a bit of a safety message, that this presentation will cover challenging topics, PTSD, depression, anxiety, suicide, and in relation to my personal story, for those of us in the room who have an experience with trauma, I'm not going to go into specific details out of respect for you and your triggers, and also my triggers as well. But I did want to share with you that it's okay to look after your own mental health. It's okay to get up and leave. I won't take that personally. It's okay to practice self-care at any stage. I must say that even though I'm employed by Beyond Blue, all of the presentation topics and information I'm going to share with you are completely my own thoughts and views and my experiences, not Beyond Blue's. Before I tell my story, I think it's really important to uncover what is meant by the term mental health, and I think that the World Health Organization offers a very appropriate definition. We know that mental health is about being cognitively, emotionally, and socially healthy. It's the way that we think, it's the way that we feel, and it's the way that we develop relationships. It's not merely the absence of a mental health condition. And what I love about this definition is from the outset, we're reminded that mental health is about a state of well-being. If we function in a state of mental wellness, we're able to encourage learning and productivity, promote positive relationships, and increase our overall health and wellness. It can sometimes be confusing as mental health is often used as a substitute for mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, and PTSD. I thought it also would be useful to share the mental health continuum with you from the Mental Health Commission of Canada. So one way to explain mental health or mental health conditions, or the difference, is to imagine a continuum where mental health is at one end, being the green, represented by feeling good and functioning well, through to severe symptoms and mental health conditions on the other. Mental health is not fixed and it's not a static state, and we can move back and forth along this scale at different times during our lives. At the green end, people are well, they show resilience and high levels of well-being. Moving to the yellow area, people may start to have difficulty coping. In the orange area, people have more difficulty coping and symptoms may increase in severity and frequency. And at the red end, most likely to be experiencing severe symptoms and may be at risk of self-harm, suicide, and mental health conditions. It's important to remember that mental health is complex, and the fact that someone is not experiencing a mental health condition doesn't necessarily mean their mental health is flourishing. And likewise, it's possible to be diagnosed with a mental health condition, like myself, and feel well in many aspects of your life. So, with this context in mind, I would now like to share with you my story. But I also do want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I did take my sleeves up to appear more tough on the streets in Logan, so yeah, that's on me. On the 27th of August 2010, I marched out of the Queensland Police Academy as a sworn constable of police and began my first year of active duty as a first-year constable stationed on rotation at Logan District. Now, for those of you who don't know Logan, it's somewhere between Gold Coast and Brisbane. Both Gold Coast and Brisbane are lovely areas. Somewhere in the middle in Logan, it all just falls into a heap. And it's probably the busiest area of Queensland for policing and calls for service. It's often said that working in Logan is like working 5 years anywhere else in the state, and the exposure to critical incidents and work volume is like none other. And I had the good fortune of working with some of the most operationally sound and professional officers in the service. I quickly learned that even though the Academy did their best to train resilient police officers, nothing can truly prepare you for what you see out on the street. At the end of my first year, I was confirmed to stay within Logan District and received Crestmead Police Station as my 10-year station. My time at Crestmead was a baptism by fire into elements of the community that I had not previously experienced in years past. I was quite fortunate in my upbringing, and this was quite a culture shock for me. Domestic violence incidents, pursuit of stolen vehicles, armed robberies, murders, street brawls, they were my bread and butter. I adapted to this highly stressful workload, also I thought incredibly well. I began to receive recognition and accolades from my peers and the Logan community alike very early on. 12 months after my initial posting, I became a field training officer, so that's mentoring new people who were fresh to wearing the suit of blue, even though I was quite fresh myself. We're talking about 2 years here. I thrived under the additional responsibility and took great pleasure in sharing my knowledge and promoting the growth and development of other officers. It wasn't until late 2012, when I'd returned home from a suicide incident, that I began to experience nightmares. I'd been to many suicide incidents before, and still to this day, I'm not sure what made this so significant. But needless to say, the death of a 12-year-old boy in Marsden hit me hard. I couldn't sleep, and when I would have nightmares. I experienced flashbacks, and I was hyper aware of my surroundings. And when I was on shift, I would actively avoid patrolling the street in where this suicide occurred. And this was the beginning of my PTSD journey. I remained at Crestmead Police Station until 2014, and during this time I attended countless critical incidents that resulted in high stress and high adrenaline. I became addicted to the adrenaline rush of being first on the scene to a hot job, and all modesty aside, I was pretty good at responding to those critical incidents. Unfortunately, I wasn't very good at processing these incidents, and I carried the emotional load with them each and every day. My moods fluctuated all of the time. I was up and I was down at any given moment. Sad, happy, angry, depressed, distant. I would hardly ever sleep for fear of nightmares and reliving certain situations, and I also cried a lot. I wasn't able to understand what was happening to me. And at the age of 23 at that point in time, I didn't have the perspective or experience to understand that something may be wrong. I felt significant organisational pressure not to be flawed, not to be vulnerable, but to be strong and resilient and wear a suit of Teflon blue. I also didn't want the weight and gravity of these situations and how I was feeling to affect my amazingly supportive partner Lisa, the result of which ultimately caused our relationship breakdown. And if you ask her, she'll tell you about the agony of watching this change happen and the struggle to keep me communicating. Well before I reached any state of self-awareness, I kept my emotions bottled up and immersed myself in high-risk situations. At the age of 23, I put my hand up for help. I recall asking senior officers for assistance as I knew I wasn't well. The flashbacks, the nightmares, the hypervigilance of my surroundings, it became too much for me to bear and I couldn't go on any longer. When I had these conversations with senior officers, I wasn't greeted with the reception that I had hoped for. I was told not to submit any official documentation or reveal my struggle publicly on the record for fear of what it may do to my career and my reputation. The officers I chose to confide in knew me well. They knew me as a young and ambitious officer who'd achieved a little bit in a relatively short period of time. And because of this, I was told that if I needed help, that I should source professional assistance privately and outside of the service. Now, looking back now and after working through some anger, I actually don't blame these officers for their response. I harbour no animosity and I place no blame. They were trying to protect me in the best way they knew how. I think it's also really important to jump forward to 2019. In my current professional role, we do work with Queensland Police, and I've noticed a remarkable shift. This is an organisation who is deeply committed to protecting the wellbeing of their staff, and there's just been some transformational change and also some changing of senior leadership there, and it's remarkable. So I just did want to give that statement there now. In late 2013, I hit rock bottom. I drank to excess, I pushed away those who were closest to me, and I did things I'm not proud of. My relationship broke down and I was no longer the Teflon officer, I was broken. But looking back, this was my divine moment. I had the choice of letting things get worse, or I could take decisive action and set about rebuilding my life and repairing the relationship damage that I had caused. It took me a while to gather the courage to seek out professional assistance to help make sense of what I was experiencing. And looking back, I think the reason why it took me so long is the great deal of shame that I felt to need to reach out. I also didn't want the police service to find out that I may have a mental health condition for fear of what it may do to my career. It took me to the complete point of overwhelm for me to reach out to my GP. I asked to be referred to a psychologist privately. Fortunately, I was referred to one of the most esteemed psychologists on the Gold Coast who specialise in providing CBT to emergency services personnel. I endured months of CBT, relaying primary and secondary trauma exposures and how they manifested and how they affected my personal life. During these sessions, the psychologist told me that I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I had a mental health condition. Part of me was relieved that someone was finally listening and taking my encounters with trauma seriously. I also felt overwhelmed, vulnerable, and a great deal of shame. I felt that I couldn't let anybody know for fear that I would be perceived as weak, which is the exact opposite of a Teflon bulletproof resilient officer. I decided to keep this diagnosis confidential, but I did, however, read extensively around what it meant to live with PTSD. So if we just go back to the mental health continuum for a moment, I was definitely experiencing signs and symptoms associated with being in those amber to red zones and how they manifested in my personal life and then life at work as well. In early 2014, I applied for and received my dream job, which is the plainclothes investigator of the Logan Child Protection and Investigation Unit. The officers in the Logan CPIU are amongst the most diligent, professional and resilient detectives in the entire police service. They are skilled investigators, interviewers, critical thinkers and innovators. I recall sitting a psychometric test prior to being appointed to the unit, part of which was disclosing any mental health conditions that I had previously experienced or may currently experience. I omitted the fact that I was suffering with PTSD, as I knew I wouldn't be successful in obtaining a position. And when I received the notification that I was successful in this application, I was absolutely gobsmacked. We undertook many protracted and complex investigations of child abuse, instances of harm and juvenile justice. One of my first tasks was to assist a colleague in reviewing quite a large hard drive that was seized, containing lots of photographic, pornographic evidence and bestiality as well. So it was quite a confronting experience. A later incident involved attending an attempted murder of a 6-month-old child, and I visited this child in intensive care, took statements, and assisted in collecting evidence through covert means. And I acknowledge that I talk about these incidents with a great deal of separation and distance. It's still a coping mechanism to this day to distance myself. In 2015, I made the very difficult but ultimately empowering choice to resign from the Queensland Police Service. I followed my partner Lisa to Melbourne after she'd been accepted to study a PhD of music at Melbourne Uni. When we moved to Melbourne, I undertook a position at a not-for-profit child welfare organisation, working with young people in government care. During this time, though, I experienced what I call a 6-month detox period. I desperately still wanted to be a police officer, but I knew for the sake of my own mental health and personal relationships that I could no longer work in this profession. I missed the camaraderie, I missed the connection, the family of blue. I actually had a pending application to join Victoria Police in a lateral transfer, but never actually hit submit because it was not the right move. When we moved to Melbourne, I was still experiencing a lot of nightmares and hypervigilance, so I decided that I needed to see a psychologist ongoing. That was in 2015. At the end of 2019, I still see this psychologist very regularly, and it's been absolutely exceptional for my mental health. I also signed up to a local gym, and I found a new strength and solace in fitness. My racing mind became quiet, and with a focus on health and fitness, I found it absolutely possible to meditate under a barbell or by strapping on a pair of running shoes and just leaving the house for hours. Running marathons and completing Spartan obstacle course races, I became fitter and stronger than ever before. But the absolute benefit, the symptoms of my PTSD decreased, my relationships were healing, and my overall health improved. I decided to turn this focus into endurance events. I had one problem though. I was unable to sit for long periods of time with my own thoughts. With running longer distances, I found that anything above about an hour or so, my mind would start to drift and I would still recall traumatic incidents and images from my time as a Queensland cop. I was terrified at the thought of enduring these nightmares for a sustained period. So what did I decide to do about it? Well, true to my all-or-nothing personality, I crafted up a scenario to confront exactly what I'd been avoiding. In 2018, in August, I faced this fear head-on and signed up to an ultra-endurance event where I was forced to sit with my thoughts and negative symptoms associated with PTSD over 6 self-reliant days. In August last year, I completed the Fire and Ice Ultramarathon, which is one of the toughest multi-terrain races in the world, spanning 250 kilometres through some pretty hairy terrain in the Icelandic highlands. I represented Australia and Iceland, competing against some of the world's most elite ultra runners. And whilst training for and competing in this event, I championed support and raised funds for Phoenix Australia, the National Centre for Excellence in Post-Traumatic Mental Health. So I'm just going to go through, and if Rory, if you could very shortly click that link. Now it's fine, it's not a problem. I'm going to show you a 45-second clip around the highlights of this race. This clip follows the journey of Tommy Chen, who is Taiwan's #1 marathon runner. He will be in the Olympics next year. He had a film crew with him that were hanging out of four-wheel drives and doing some pretty cool stuff with video cameras. So this is some film footage of the event from the perspective of Tommy's team. Rory, if you could click the video link. Thanks, mate. All right, I realise that I'm running out of time very quickly, so Rory, if you could just head back to the presentation, that'd be great. Thanks, mate. So that's a brief snippet of what that event was like. And I'm just going to go over to the next slide very quickly. My pursuit of endurance sport to heal my PTSD did not end there. In May this year, a group of friends and I jumped on a Concept 2 ski erg. So Concept 2 are the manufacturers who make the rowers that you see in gyms. They decided to make a machine that mimics the movements of Nordic skiing. It's basically an upright rower and it hurts like hell, and we decided to spend a 24-hour period on there to pull the furthest distance in a 24-hour period. I'm not going to click the video link because I am running out of time, but needless to say, we now have a world record that is recognised by the manufacturers of the equipment, and also Guinness World Records is going through the process now. So in October, are we in October? Yes, we are. In October 2019, where does this focus on fitness lead me? Well, I've now been happily married for 8 months. My relationships are healing and closer than ever, and I feel really well in many aspects of my life. I still see my psychologist regularly, and I have ongoing tune-ups. I'm back at university, and I'm studying a Masters of Mental Health Practice through Griffith Uni. I work at an organisation that I'm deeply connected to in a position that I'm very passionate about. I spend most of my time in the green end of the mental health continuum. Yes, with the ups and downs of life, I do fluctuate into that amber to red zone occasionally, but for the most part, I'm in the green. And my symptoms of PTSD are kept at bay. So I've found that it's very possible to heal and reduce the symptomology associated with PTSD through a focus on health, wellbeing, relationships and fitness. As I've run out of time, I'm happy to chat in the lunch break, and there will be a panel presentation later today. So thank you.